And welcome back to Stream City Radio, Stream City Sports, and the college football fix as we, let me try and fix my camera here a little bit while I'm at it. There we go. College football fix, putting some sanity back in college football. And this is talking about realigning things and putting some common sense into it. This is not my favorite scenario, and I've got a bunch of them we're going to lay out for you. But this one, to me, is probably the easiest transition. You get the least amount of pushback on it. You're giving a lot of people what they want. This is not by far optimal to me, but it is workable in a shorter term than the rest of them are. So we're looking at option one. I've got two versions of option one. Both of them are 4 conferences. One has 18 teams in a conference. One has 20 teams in a conference. Both of them have an option for 16 or 20-team playoff. We'll start out looking at the 18-team option and what that would look like. Basically, you've got 4 18-team conferences broke into 3 6-team divisions. Why 6? Because I don't want to play the same team every single year, but I want to be able to play everybody in my conference in a short period of time. So that gives you the regular season will break down this way: 9 division games, 5 of them, or 9 conference games, 5 of them would be your division games, and then you would rotate between the other 12 teams. You'd play every one of them every third year. So you'd rotate 4 on the schedule. And then you have 1 spot open for you to schedule a permanent rival or whoever. Okay. We're going to give you 3 non-conference games that are not going to be scheduled by you. The only game you have input on is that 1 permanent rival. So you get to pick who that is. Your 3 non-conference games will be scheduled by the league. And when I say league, I don't mean the SEC or the Big Ten. I mean the College Football League. We're keeping the conferences, but they're not going to have conference independence. So there's your schedule. You've got so basically you're ending up 13 games. You're getting paid now. You're going to play an extra game. We're doing away with conference championship games and going straight into the playoffs. So not necessarily adding a lot more games to the final 2 teams in the championship, giving everybody 1 more game during the regular season for revenue purposes. We're going to play 1 game at a neutral site, and that's going to come in this 3-game round robin we're going to do between basically conference challenges. Week 1 would be Labor Day weekend, and we would play those games at neutral sites, basically bowl venues, and we're going to take that entire week to get them played. So it doesn't preclude doing bowl games later. If there's a will to do that, so be it, but this puts everything, it preserves the bowls, changes them a little bit, but puts them in a setting that means something. So you will also have those 3 non-conference games. We'll take the last 2 teams standing from a year prior, assuming they're from a different conference. Last year it would have been the ACC and the Big Ten, and we're going to match them against each other. The ACC would, and we'll figure out the home and aways, but these are happening on neutral sites, so it really doesn't matter. So you have 18 quote-unquote bowl games played between the ACC and the Big Ten. You're going to do the same thing with the Big Ten and the SEC. 18 games, matching them up. Then we'll let 2 conferences have home games one weekend. Say the Big Ten and the SEC get home games week 2, and the Big Ten's playing the Big 12. The SEC's playing the ACC. Then week 3, the Big 12 and ACC get we can't work. We'd have to work it out anyhow, because what I just said wouldn't work. Because in any rate, long story short, you would have all three conferences match up against each other, one home, one away, one neutral site, and they would be done. All the number ones would play each other, all the number 8 teams would play each other. Why can that work? Is because you're going to get in based on your conference record mostly. These would become very secondary games that would be used as tiebreakers only in the event of 2 teams being tied for the wild card spots, because we're going to have a handful of wild card spots. How's that going to work come playoff time? Assuming we're 16 teams, you'd have your 12 division champs, 3 from each conference, and 1 wild card from every conference. There's your playoffs. If you want to expand to 20, you do the same thing. Just we're going to add 2 wild cards from every conference and play it down that way. And you're going to have, basically you'd have a wild card round where all the wild card teams would play each other to get those last 4 slots. So that does work. And it is a real playoff. So there you go. That's how you could pull that off. What are the conferences going to look like? And this is kind of a blend between what I'd really want to do and what I think would be easier to make happen. And basically, we're going to let Clemson and Florida State out of the ACC. They've been throwing a fit. They won't gone. It's not really going to matter anymore because we're going to revenue sharing, but we'll let them out because they probably burned a bridge or 2. Okay. ACC, you would have 3 divisions. One would be Boston College, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and we're bringing West Virginia back from the Big 12 and putting them in a conference that geographically makes sense. Gives us a huge Pittsburgh-West Virginia rivalry back and would be fantastic. Then we've got Duke, Georgia Tech, Miami, North Carolina, NC State, and Wake Forest. The final conference in the ACC, and this one, we're pulling a couple more teams out of the Big 12 in Central Florida and Cincinnati, pairing them up with Louisville, bringing Maryland back from the Big 12, and then we're going to put in Memphis and Tulane. There's your, whatever you want to call it, North, Central, East, however you want to tag them, there's your 3 divisions. The SEC is going to get those 2 wayward children who left the ACC and wanted out so bad. And we're sticking Clemson and Florida State in with Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, and South Carolina. So now Florida State becomes a conference game. South Carolina, Clemson does as well, opens the door for Florida State to then play Miami as their permanent. So, and then opens the door for South Carolina, Clemson, Florida to explore other options as far as who they want as permanents. You got Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Vanderbilt as your central, if we want to make the other the east. And your west could be Arkansas, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Missouri. Like I said, this is not my optimal situation, but this happens with giving a couple of people their wish and getting out of the ACC, pulling up some teams that probably belong with a shot to play at this level. And if you're going to do 18, you're going to have to pull up some teams. The Big 12, well, let's do the Big 10 next. The Big 10, we're putting Notre Dame in there. We've already said Maryland's gone, so Notre Dame's going to come join the Big 10. And then basically, you've got the 18 teams that are there. So it's Indiana, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers. You've got Iowa, Nebraska. Kind of stinks for Iowa, but Oregon, UCLA, USC, Washington. And then you've got Illinois, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Northwestern, Wisconsin. Big 12, we are going and grabbing the 2 orphan programs out there in the Northwest in Washington State and Oregon State, and we're putting them in with a bunch of their old Pac-12 rivals in Stanford, California, Arizona State, and Arizona, because we're not leaving Cal and Stanford in the conference with in the ACC. That makes no sense. We're also pulling SMU out of the ACC, and we're going to put them in an almost all Texas league with Baylor, Houston, TCU, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State. And then we've got kind of the Mountain League in BYU, Colorado, Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State, Utah. So outside of the Big Ten having one division, a big portion of one division as a West Coast deal, the rest of it makes pretty good sense. Like I said, not my dream scenario, but it's workable. If we went to 20 teams, we would have we're going to keep the 4 big conferences. We're going to go to 5-team division zone because now we got 20. So we've got 4 or 5-team divisions. You play your 9 conference games. You play your 4 division teams. And you would rotate 3 remaining teams, and you'd keep 1 permanent rival. The other way to do this, which I might like a little bit better, it doesn't give us as much play between the conferences, but that's okay too, would be to just play another division, an entire division, and only play 1 non-conference game, which would fall on that Labor Day weekend. It would be the Big Ten playing the ACC. It'd be the SEC playing the Big 12, and do that. That works. What I do love about that scenario is everybody in a division has almost an identical schedule. Their schedule varies by 2 games. The permanent one that they can schedule and the 1 non-conference game that gets played at the beginning of the season. Other than that, you're playing the same other 11 teams. And that part of it, I really kind of like. You know what? Doing my math, you can do, we don't have to do that. You're playing your four teams from your conference. You play another entire division, 5. That's 9 games right there. You're permanent in 3. You still do the 3 rotating things. So yeah, forget everything I said a minute ago. We don't need to do that because it still works for a 13-game schedule. What would the conferences look like? This one got a little bit more movement in. We're going to start out with the SEC. What would the SEC look like under this? And I took and grabbed some rumors that have floated and plugged some things in. In this scenario, we're going to let Clemson and Florida State go to the Big Ten. And they're going to have Maryland, Penn State, and Rutgers in the division with them. Then you would have Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Wisconsin in a division together. Illinois, Indiana, Northwestern, Ohio State, Purdue in a conference together. Nebraska, Oregon, UCLA, USC, Washington. So there's your Big Ten under that scenario. The Big 12, well, you know what? Let's jump in and look at the SEC next. The SEC is going to go ahead and take, they're going to go ahead and take a couple teams that had been rumored. Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina will now be in a division with North Carolina and North Carolina State. Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Virginia would be a division. See them rating the ACC a little bit. Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Mississippi, Mississippi State. And then finally, Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M, Missouri, and Kansas. Because in this scenario, the SEC is trying to bolster their basketball. And talking about basketball, if you had Kansas, North Carolina, Kentucky, all in the same conference, that's stout. That is a lot of history falling on your side in that situation. The Big 12, Arizona State. We had to bring more teams up in this scenario because we got four extra teams up. Fresno State, San Diego State, UNLV will make a division. Baylor, Houston, SMU, TCU, Texas Tech. Then we'd have Colorado, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Iowa State. We're pulling Memphis in. BYU, Colorado State, UNLV. I have twice now. Utah State, Boise State. We would have to revisit that. I don't know how I ended up UNLV twice in that, but I did. So maybe in that situation, leave UNLV there and give me San Jose State in on with San Diego State, Fresno State in the Big 12 with Arizona State. That would work. And then finally the ACC, which is going to see the biggest changes because they lost a lot of teams. We're going to have Boston College, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Temple, West Virginia. Temple gets called up from the AC, or it's now just the American. Then we've got Central Florida, Georgia Tech, Miami, South Florida, Tulane as one. Duke, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, Memphis, Louisville. And then California, Notre Dame, Oregon State, Stanford, Washington State. Yes, I know Notre Dame wouldn't love this. Nah, I don't care. Don't. They only have as much power as the other 138 teams, 137 teams give them. So it's time to stop kissing up to Notre Dame quite so much. Like I said, this is not my dream scenario. This is something that could be cobbled together fairly quickly, more so the first version of this than the second. This requires a lot more moving parts. But if we were to move to something quickly, this could work. You could actually take that first one and almost immediately implement it. If you told Notre Dame, hey, you're in the ACC, guys, or we'll get somebody to take your place and you can play in the group of 5. Then the ACC and the Big Ten already have theirs. As chaotic as the map would be, they're there. The Big 12 could immediately go get Washington State and Oregon State. They're at 18. That leaves the SEC needing to get 2 teams. You know, I don't know, when you look at the SEC, once you take the TV part of it out of it, who do they go for? To me, Tulane makes a lot of sense. They're a former member. Bring them back in. And, you know, you could either go for South Florida, would be a possibility, to give you a little bit more presence in the state of Florida. If you really wanted a foothold in North Carolina, you could grab East Carolina. Because once again, it's not going to be driven by needing to get top tier teams. You just need to fill this thing out to make it work, because the TV revenue is getting divided equally. We're not playing that game anymore. So it would make sense to go get 2 teams that fit well within your map. So to me, you could make that happen in 2027 if you wanted to. It's just not. It wouldn't be impossible to make that happen, and it would make a lot more sense than moving more big time programs around and disrupting more and more of the big, the big time rivalries, which have got to be. We've got to make those more of a priority in college football. It's what makes college football special. To see the hate between Missouri and Kansas just had to warm your cockles of your little heart. I mean, that's what college football is supposed to look like. And for us to lose those along the way, and that's why I left in here in all these scenarios, the ability to schedule somebody permanently, to get a Mizzou-Kansas game back would be fantastic. To be able to preserve Miami and Florida State, or Florida and Florida, Florida State's going to be in with Florida now, so you can preserve that Florida State-Miami thing. You can keep the Georgia Tech thing going. You can keep there's a lot of big rivalries that just don't have to go away now. And the thing is, you've got the opportunity for Michigan and Ohio State, wouldn't be in the same division, wouldn't play each other every year, but that could be the permanent rival in the years they don't play each other. So it gives you the ability to do one of the most important things about college football, and that is preserving the rivalries. They need to be prioritized. The first version of this, to me, much better than the second version, but the next ones we're going to move on to, because I've got multiple other versions. We're going to look at the option 2, which is 2 leagues. These are one of them a little bit smaller, 72 teams, one an 80-team league. But this will take us down to 2 conferences, which could be where we're headed eventually, where basically you've got the Big Ten and the SEC. And how would that all play out? How do we make that work? And taking a look at that. But actually, as we move to that model, we can preserve even more of these long-time rivalries. And, to me, that just, you can't overemphasize how important that should be to college football. And like I said, the idea of doing the moving, and I know everybody won't love it. There's nothing everybody's going to love. I mean, if we put it back to the way it was in 1980, the newer college football fans are going to hate that. I don't want to see bowls go away. I do want to see them mean something again. And if we continue to just erode away at it, now you can address it somewhat with NIL and basically locking these guys down under contract to where they don't have the option to sit out bowl games, whether they're meaningless or not. You're going to play in them. But I do like the idea better of moving the front end of the season, making that Labor Day week something special. And, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't preclude you from having some of the bigger bowl games down the stretch. I am not a huge proponent of using the bowl games for a ton of the playoffs. I think you need to use some of them. But we can do that even if we use the final 5. When you get down to Final 4, you'd have 2 games there and a championship game. You could do the same thing with a group of 5. But I love the idea of them being on campus. You cannot go past. What we have now is a little ridiculous, having to go play basically 3, potentially 3 bowl games is insanity. Using the championship game as a bowl game, going back to that model would make sense. And, the most I could see would be stretching it out 1 more week but now you're talking about 2 bowl games and a championship game. That's a lot of, if we're going to keep this about the fans, and that's what we need to do, the NFL doesn't do that. The NFL doesn't drag their fans. Yeah, if you're the road team, you're stuck. But let's face it, people don't travel in the NFL the way they do in college football. You don't have these mass migrations of, trying to fill 2 halves of a stadium with opposing fans. You don't even have that in the Super Bowl. Let's face it, the Super Bowl is corporate. It's corporate. You got a small percentage of fans from both teams, but it's basically a corporate outing. That is the last thing I want to see happen with college football. And you run the risk of that if you're trying to ask these teams to travel too much. It makes a lot more sense for, Georgia or Ohio State or Alabama or USC or whoever it is to host several games where you're only trying to ask 10% of the other teams, people to travel to fill that stadium up. And maybe, and if they can scalp and buy tickets and want to come, great. More power to them. But that makes a lot more sense than, these 50-50 situations. Because if I'm a fan and I'm looking at it and going, all right, I think my team's got a shot here. I think we could run it all the way out. We got to play week 1 in New Orleans. Week 2, we got to be in Tempe. And then I got to go to Oregon. Down to Miami and play in the Orange Bowl. I'm not affording all 3 of those. So I've got to kind of pick. And if I think my team's really good and got a shot at the championship, I'm probably not going to Sugar Bowl. I've been there a bunch of times. I feel really good that we can win that ball game. So I'm betting that we're going to at least make it to the next game. So I'm buying and gearing up to go to Tempe. Or I'm really confident, you know what? I'm not messing with the playoff games. I'm going straight to the championship game. So you're forcing people to make economic decisions that affect the attendance of these ball games. And I don't want to hear about they're not supporting their team. You're financially bankrupting people. I mean, if you're going to make those 3 trips, you are either really well heeled or you're mortgaging your house and selling off kids just to be able to go to these 3 ball games, and that's insanity. We can't have that. If we do the on-campus games and whittle it down to where at most I'm making 2 trips, then that's a much easier pill to swallow and going to be done much more likely. You're not going to have, those stadiums will be packed. The home stadiums will be packed. And, that just makes a lot more sense than, what we've been doing. And, and maybe you look at, because the playoffs are going to fall when most of these schools are out for winter break, Christmas break. So maybe instead of 10%, you give 15% and take some student tickets away because a lot of students aren't in town anymore. So there's different ways you could do it to make it work. I think what we're doing right now is just a big cash grab that is going to blow up in college football's face if they're not very careful. And I love the idea of having full stadiums between teams that both feel like they come in there with a chance to win. It's about bragging rights. Hey, I might have finished last in my conference, but I'm going to play the last team out of the other 3. And you know what? We're a better conference, so we're going to go in there and smoke those teams. People will show up for that, especially if it's week 1. Everybody thinks they're winning the national title week 1, or at least got a shot at it, or at least has a shot to make a run at a conference championship. So, you're going to fill those stadiums up. And, if you did, if it's 18 or 20 teams, okay, I've got 9 or 10 of my games that are home games for my conference. And then, you fill it out that way. You make those regional. So you have regional draws for everybody to where you're not asking both teams to travel a long distance. The home team might be traveling a couple hours from home, but, if you're Wisconsin, you're not traveling as the home team to the Orange Bowl. You might be going to Lambeau Field, you might be going down to Chicago, might be going down to St. Louis, but you're not traveling, you're making these drivable games again. And I think that would be hugely successful. And I think would add a lot of fun to it. And talk about bragging rights, buddy, you'd have them then. By golly, it wouldn't be, you'd have hard numbers. It wouldn't be about, this puffing your chest out and just talking louder than everybody else wouldn't get it done anymore. I hope you enjoyed it. College Football Fix. We'll be back next week with another one, and we're going to talk about the next option, which is 2 conferences and either 32 team conferences or 2 40-team conferences, I believe is what 36 and 40. That's the 2 we'll look at. Enjoy your week.